Can You Be a Gay Christian? Part 2. So far we've been dealing with the question, why are Christians so hung up on homosexuality? Why do we emphasize this sin? And we're right in the midst of me demonstrating that the reason why Christians talk about this sin so much is that we're being put in the position where we have to by the gay rights movement in America. And so what we looked at in the last video was New York City's public school curriculum. And here was the last piece of that. Now, this is what a correspondent named John Leo, U.S. News and World Report, not known for being a conservative bastion, had to say about this. A line is being crossed here. In fact, a brand new ethic is descending upon the city's public school system. The traditional civic virtue of tolerance, if gays want to live together, it's their own business, has been replaced with a new ethic requiring approval and endorsement. If gays want to live together, we must acknowledge the positive aspects of their way of life. End of quote. I'm pretty sure this quote is from the 80s as well, the 1980s. And so here you can see a news correspondent who recognized that this is going much further than live and let live. This is not the libertarian utopia that gay rights folks are pushing for. They want you to acknowledge their point of view. Let's get rid of that little Facebook notification. Now, here's how far things have come. And really what I'm sharing with you here is old news. This happens a lot these days. Atlanta's fire chief, a guy named Kelvin Cochran, was suspended. What happened was he wrote a devotional. I think it was a devotional book. And now, before he wrote it, he got approval from his superiors that it'd be okay to do this. And apparently he started giving this devotional book out to various firefighters. Well, one portion of the book dealt with homosexuality. Now, it's not like it was the theme of the book. The theme of the book was who told you that you were naked, which of course is an allusion to Genesis chapter 3, where the man and the woman sinned. Of course, probably people thought there was something sexual about the whole thing because the word naked is there, and we as a culture don't look at things in context, do we? Nor do we read entire books. But here's a quote from the book. Uncleanness, whatever is the opposite of purity, including sodomy, homosexuality, lesbianism, pederasty, bestiality, and all other forms of sexual perversion. Well, Chief Cochran got in trouble. Somebody reported him for distributing this book, which he had been given the okay to do, and he was reprimanded for it. He was actually suspended at first by the mayor, Kasim Reed. And here's what Reed said. I profoundly disagree with and am deeply disturbed by the sentiments expressed in the paperback regarding the LGBT community. I will not tolerate discrimination of any kind within my administration. Now keep in mind, Chief Cochran was not discriminating against anyone. From all accounts, he treated everybody fairly. A good guy to work with. That's what everybody said. So he wasn't discriminating against anyone. And do you see the irony here? That the Atlanta mayor actually was discriminating against Cochran because he suspended him and then eventually fired him. Why? Because of his views on homosexuality. Because he said that homosexuality was a sin. So you see, it's not that Christians are militant about this issue. It's that we're being attacked over our point of view on this issue. Now, there's some good news in this one. He was fired, Cochran was fired, but then he won a lawsuit and got $1.2 million. This is reported on the website by the Alliance Defending Freedom. If you ever get caught in a pinch like this is a great organization to contact. And I would say if you have the means and the time, you should fight it as much as you can. But Cochran is not the only one who's falling prey to this kind of thing anymore. There are militant gay rights groups who are now contacting florists, photographers, various people who are in the wedding industry, trying to catch them. Bakers, lots of people who make cakes. And if you have a moral issue with serving a gay wedding, then they're going to come after you. They're going to take you to court. And that's happening all over the place as we speak. I've even heard stories of, one example was a young lady who was in a counseling program at a university who was basically drummed out of the program because she could not in good conscience counsel someone who was in a homosexual relationship, because she could not encourage that as a good thing. She actually recommended someone else, but if she failed to agree that homosexuality is a good thing and acknowledge it, and if she wouldn't take some re-education classes, some sensitivity training, then she was drummed out. She didn't agree to it, and she was drummed out. And that's happening a lot more these days. Now, so why do we make such a big deal out of it? Because it's being shoved in our face. That's why. And I really am getting tired of hearing people say, well, you're making an issue out of it. Well, frankly, we would love to live and let live, but that's not what's happening. But let me take this a step further. In speaking out on homosexuality, aside from the law and aside from our rights being trampled on, let me back up. Should homosexuals receive special protection under the law? Now, probably most Christians are going to say no, they shouldn't receive any special protection. Protection, yeah, but not special protection. Well, should homosexuals receive equal protection under the law? Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, that's ridiculous. Of course they should receive equal protection. Well, hold on a second. Now, stick with me in what I'm about to say. If you don't go the whole way with what I'm about to share with you, you're going to think I'm the most intolerant, bigoted person, the biggest hater on the face of the earth. But hear the entire argument before you draw a conclusion. Let's look at some studies that have been done. Dr. Paul Cameron did a study in 1983. Now, keep in mind, this was done during the height of the AIDS epidemic. Maybe not the height, but this was really near the beginning. And he looked at 7,500 obituaries. And here's what he discovered. The average death of male homosexuals at this time was 39 years old. That was with AIDS. 42 without AIDS. The average death of female homosexuals, 44 years. Now, this is 1983, so things have changed some. Here's further what was discovered. 70% of homosexuals in San Francisco have had AIDS, hepatitis B, and or tuberculosis. What does this mean? It means that the lifestyle, the gay lifestyle, is unhealthy. It brings with it disease. It brings with it a shorter lifespan. Put aside the law, put aside morality. It is an unhealthy way to live. Now, what else do we find here? Homosexuality reduces the average lifespan by 21 to 33 years. Now, that is an aggregate. All right, I know you will find individual cases where that's not true. But 21 to 33 years. See, here's what you have to keep in mind. The images that you see of homosexuals in Hollywood, the cute older gay couple who are monogamous, that is not the reality. The homosexual lifestyle is all about sexual freedom. It's about having multiple partners, hundreds, maybe even thousands of partners, sometimes even in anonymous sexual experiences. The lifestyle brings with it all sorts of health problems, including higher rates of addiction, higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicide. Now, sometimes when you point that out, homosexuals will say, well, if you were discriminated against as much as homosexuals, you would have a higher depression rate too. Well, I want you to think about that for a second. Historically, Christians have been persecuted. Did that give them a higher suicide rate, a higher depression rate? What if you could think of any other group let's say Jews who were persecuted by Nazis, if you knew they had a higher suicide rate and depression rate because of that persecution, would you conclude that it was because of the persecution? Well, no. If it was Christians, you would say, well, there's probably something wrong with them psychologically in the first place if they have a higher depression rate. And in our culture, there is no persecution of homosexuals, but they still have a higher depression rate, substance abuse rate, suicide rate. Why? Because there is something mentally imbalanced in that lifestyle, and emotionally, there is just something wrong there. I mean, I could just easily say it's the guilt. It's the guilt that's underlying that they know is there. They know they're morally responsible. But let me back out of all that. Average lifespan, 21 to 33 years less than the average heterosexual. Now look at this. Smoking reduces the average lifespan only 5 to 10 years. So here's my point. If we have laws on the books to discourage smoking because it reduces the average lifespan, should there not then be laws on the book to discourage homosexuality because it reduces the average lifespan? Now, I'm not saying that's what I promote. I'm not promoting that at all. Frankly, I think we should get rid of all of the smoking hysteria. And I don't promote laws that would in any way take away equal protection from homosexuals. But I'm just saying, why are we going to go after one and not the other? But my larger point is this. Homosexuality is bad for people. It's bad for them physically. It's bad for them emotionally. Study after study demonstrates that. So, here's the bottom line. Gay rights activists keep pushing their agenda upon us, and we must respond. Let me give you, I might save this. I'll go ahead and tell you now, maybe repeat it in another video. Here's an easy thing to say. If somebody asks you what you think about homosexuality, I think one of the best ways to respond is, well, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and Jesus promoted sexual expression between one man and one woman committed to each other for life. And as his follower, I agree with him. That way you can make them take it up with Jesus. But it keeps being pushed in our face, and so we have to respond. Just be careful how you respond. And then also, the most loving thing we can do to protect people physically is to warn them of the dangers of the homosexual lifestyle. And as you can see, with a shortened lifespan, it is exceedingly dangerous. And we need to come to terms with what love means. Love does not mean being nice. Love does not mean agreeing with everybody. What if you did that with your kids, and you were just nice to them all the time, and you agreed with them in everything? That would be totally unloving. To love someone, biblically, to love somebody as a verb, means to seek their best. And the homosexual lifestyle is nowhere near the best. It's one of the most destructive lifestyles that a person could be involved in. Not only physically, but as we'll see, definitely spiritually.